Welcome back to more highlights from the United States Chess League. This is FM Mike Klein reporting. The remaining slate of games in Week 6 gave some teams a chance to climb back into the playoff hunt and left others in dire straits. Once again, we'll see the critical nature of endgames in the league. In the first match, Philly desperately needed a win to keep pace in the very closely packed Eastern Division. It looked certain that their match with San Francisco would end in a tie, but GM Sergei Ehrenberg kept his game going long enough until GM Jesse Cry cracked. Complicated queen and pawn grandmaster endgames are no stranger to the USCL this season, and this matchup was no exception. Ehrenberg had more pawns and a more sheltered king, but Cry crucially had the only passed pawn. Cry played 56 queen d3 instead of pushing his d-pawn in an attempt to play queen e3 check and push his pawn without the white king being able to blockade it. Ehrenberg, using a series of checks, kept preventing this maneuver. After hiding his king on g3, Cry could unpin his pawn with something like queen c4 when the game is still interesting, but instead the mechanic's top player slipped with queen d2, allowing an elementary king and pawn win for Ehrenberg. As this was the only decisive result of the match, Philly won 2.5 to 1.5, gaining a half game on the Knights this week, and joining a four-way tie for the final 3 playoff spots in the East. For San Francisco, they only have 1.5 wins on the season, and they may need to run the table to avoid missing the playoffs for only the second time in team history. Boston and LA both began Week 6 a good distance out of playoff contention, and neither got the result they were looking for after a 2-2 draw. All 4 boards were decisive, with the top 3 coming down to interesting endgames. Grandmaster Malik Kashian of LA was down a pawn for absolutely no compensation, but found a way to actually win on board 1, while National Master Vadim Metarasov evened the score for Boston on board 3 in his own rook and pawn endgame. In yet another queen and pawn struggle, I.M. Keaton Kira once again showed that the most advanced pawn trumps the number of pawns in queen endgames. After marching his king up to the last rank, he exchanged queens and won the pawn race by a single tempo. I.M. Steven Zirk had the bad fortune of being left with a knight pawn, which is a loss even after the pawn reaches the second rank. Seattle and Manhattan also drew their match, and in the process continued the common theme this week of having the match decided in the endgame. The Sluggers' National Master Joshua Sinanen added to his impressive play this year by notching yet another win on board 3. But on board 4, the Applesauce's National Master Alex King evened the score with a win of his own. With board 1 ending in a lifeless draw, the match would be settled on board 2. International Master Dmitry Schneider traded a bishop for 3 pawns early, lost 1 back, won 2 pieces for a rook, and finally achieved 2 extra pawns at the end. The problem was their placement. If either pawn was nearly any other place on the board, it is probably a win, but having them doubled gave White no room to operate his king. In the end, Schneider accepted a stalemate, otherwise a sort of Philidor position would result, ending in a draw anyway. Seattle remains the Baltimore Orioles of the USCL. They are tied for second place in the West, despite winning less than half of their games. In the final match of the week, the Kingfishers took out the Scorpions 3-1, thanks to wins on the bottom 2 boards. Baltimore's National Master Jared DeFibaugh took out the red-hot I.M. Mark Ginsburg as black in only 25 moves. Then his teammate, National Master Ricky Selzler, also won on board 4 with a spirited attack of his own. Selzler had already weakened WFM Amanda Mateer's king position. 35 G5 looks strange at first, but upon closer inspection, it either creates a strong passed pawn or opens the H-file. Mateer chose the latter, but the reply knight e5 gets Seltzer's queen to the open file in a hurry. F takes e5 leads to mate after queen h3 check, king g8, rook e8 check, king f7, queen h5 check. Mateer attempted to trade rooks, but the white pieces kept coming, and after queen h3 check she resigned in view of queen h8 and queen f8 mate. Both Arizona and Baltimore find themselves only a half game out of the playoff berth in their respective divisions. With only 2 match wins separating the entirety of the Eastern Division, Week 7 will prove to be crucial. Until then, we'd like to thank our sponsors, PokerStars, Chess.com, and the ICC.